Several weeks ago, a movie called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare came out, and in this movie, I found out something that really bothered me a long time about the way Jews and Israel is portrayed, which I see as anti Semitic. And I would explain why in a second. But first, what exactly troubled me in this Holocaust fantasy of Jews taking revenge against Germans? So, first of all, the main thing that really bothered me is the character of Marjorie Stewart in the movie. And this character is this strong female soldier who kills Nazis, and this character is also part of a whole range of female Jews expressed in movies, like or in video games. Like, for example, we have Sagan in World War Z, and we have Ayana Jacobi in Rainbow Six, the Rainbow Six games and books, and we have Giselle Yashar in Fast and Furious, portrayed by Gal Gadot as an ex-Mossad. Always they are ex-Mossad or special unit soldiers, and in most of these movies, the role of a strong Jewish character is portrayed by a woman. You can barely see a male character really taking the role of this virile Israeli or Jewish man. If there is a strong Jewish character, sometimes even a violent one, it would be a woman. And even in the Wikipedia page of the Israeli Defense Force, you can see that while showing some graphs and stuff about the structure of the Israeli army, you can see female military police, you can see female IDF corporal, you can see flight course graduates, female graduate courses, you can see women in the English version, the American version of the Wikipedia page for the IDF. If I look for the Hebrew page, for example, I would find something completely different. Let's see the number of women if I look at the Wikipedia page of Tzahal, of the IDF. And then we have nothing in here with women. Men, and the head of the military, the Ramatkals. Okay, thanks. Thanks. We have one female instructor here, but it's mostly men, and this is very understandable because the combat jobs in the Israeli army are mostly manned by men. And for numbers, let's see numbers, for example, percentage of females in the combat units in Israel. It says here that the women are 18% from the combat units, and they're mostly observers, they are mostly plane fighters. You won't find women in what is called the regular land units, like Golani, Tzanchanim, Givati, Kfir. You won't find women in there, or in the special units, Eret Matkal, Shaldag, Shayetet. You won't find women in there. There are some specific units for women, but they are not considered as combat units like the male units. So women are 18% from the war effort, from the combat units, and in the United States, women are 18.8% of the combat units. This is their percentage, meaning that in the United States there are more women in combat units. But when the American media tries to show the IDF, their representation of women is staggering. You can really imagine and believe that the Israeli army is all female and males barely have any combat missions and barely uh, participate in the combat units. So why is it? Why is the American representation of the IDF is always females, females, females? I think that the reason for that is because there is something very anti-Semitic in the way media, American media, really thinks about Zionism and Jews in general. And what do I mean by that? Now, in a study made like 20, 30 years ago, many historians that read Edward Said Orientalism, in which Edward Said claims that Orientalism portrays the Orient in Western eyes, also blames Israel, by the way, for being Orientalist towards the Palestinians, that the West really understands the Orient or imagines the Orient as backward, as being indifferent to someone penetrating him from the outside, being feminine. This is the word, the key word here, being feminine. The Oriental male as something more feminine, or the Orient in general as being more exotic and feminine. And Jewish historians and scholars really understood that, or took these ideas of Edward Said as something that is also very much relevant to how the West viewed Jews. So, for example, I have here an article by Stephanie Schuler Springerum, in which she says that the Jews in general in the late 19th century were deemed very much like women or homosexuals. Mentally, they were considered prone to melancholy or hysteria. They were deemed immoral, devoid of character, manipulative, mendacious, and unpredictable. At the same time, like women in general, they were seen as lacking in self-control, meaning that at the beginning of the 20th century, the late 19th century, Jews were considered in at least Central Europe as being very feminine, and we can also see that 40 years later in Nazi propaganda against Jews, in which they were represented as being very feminine during World War I. That the Jewish soldiers that served in World War I, thousands of them died in the war, they didn't really die. They were only at the back lines. They were cowardly. They were feminine. Something that didn't really adhere to actual facts about the war, but this is the fantasy that they perpetrated. Jews are feminine. They can't really fight. They are not virile enough. And this idea also represented itself in a movement, in the Zionist movement, or part of the Zionist movement called the New Hebraism, in which the Zionists of the late 19th century, early 20th century, they really wanted to take the Jew outside of the exile because the exile made him feminine. They also accepted this fantasy, or believed this fantasy, and they said that the Jewish male in the late 19th century became, after hundreds of years outside of Israel, he became feminine, he became a recipient, he became helpless like a woman, like how women were perceived at the time. And therefore, the New Hebraism really tried to make a new man, a new Jewish man, a man that works the land, he is muscular, later he would be a combat man, he is tanned, he is someone that really puts the foot, he is never servile, he is against being penetrated. So this is why the Jewish man in Zionism was such an important figure in Zionism in large. And Zionism really tried at these years to create a new imagination of the Jew. And they did it by making the Jew more athletic, for example. They inaugurated many sport clubs named after famous Jewish figures like Bar Kokhba, the Maccabees, Joshua, all the strong, virile Israeli Jewish men from history. They really tried to take them and show them to the Jewish population and say, this is what you need to be. Don't be this feminine thing that the whole world looks at you and believes you are. And this is why I believe when the United States and the English speaking world mostly represents Jews, strong Jews in movies as females, and especially when he talks about the IDF and shows females, it really portrays Jews and Israel in this orientalistic way. The Jews are feminine. The Jews, only the strong people in the Jewish people are only the women, because the men are even less than women. They let the women fight for them. They are the really strong Jews out there. Israeli men are non-existent. They are feminine. So this is why I think that what happened in the movie, their decision to portray, again, like in many Hollywood movies, the strong Israeli figure as a female, is very anti-Semitic. Think about it.